Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my creepy lair. Today, I will be sharing with you some scary stories for the new year. The new year is a time for new resolutions and changes. Changes that we say we will do and never act upon. But one thing that never changes, and that is the darkness. So buckle up and let me feast on your fears and sorrows. Let's begin. And always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator. So enjoy. And spooky new year to you.
Number 1. The New Year's Eve girl who wasn't there. I think this is more suited here. I'm sure you'll tell me if not. I haven't told this story for a really long time, so I might be a bit rusty around the edges. It happened New Year's Eve 2004 when I was 14 or 15. I was a good kid. I didn't drink until I was legally old enough. So this can't be put down to, which is what people assume when I tell them it was New Year's Eve. I had been to a New Year's Eve party at a friend's house while her parents were out. When her parents returned, we left them to it and moved the party to another friend's house. Around 5 a.m. I decided to call it a night and make my way back home. I walked for 20 minutes before getting to the stage where I have to walk under a motorway. Just to set the scene, you cross a bridge and you're under the motorway. So it's essentially an open tunnel held up with lots of thick pillars. It goes on for quite a while. There are 3 roads that cross underneath it. The first is right at the start, the second is about 200 meters up, and the final one about 300 meters beyond that. The final one is right at the end where I come out and walk up my street. Just behind the final road is a street light, and then a working men's club. Now, I had seen a couple of people scattered around, so when I came to cross the second road, I saw a figure up ahead under the streetlight. I didn't bat an eyelid, especially with the Working's Men Club behind it. As I got closer, I realized the figure was a girl, and she was wearing a fancy dress. She had a costume that would have fitted somewhere between the 1900s and the 1920s. It was a light color, but our streetlights are orange, so everything was disguised by the orange glow, and I couldn't say for certain what color it was. She was standing, looking to her right, up the road, into what would be oncoming traffic. I remember thinking it was an odd costume for a New Year Eve's party, but each to their own. I stared at her right up until I was standing directly opposite, the other side of the final road. I looked left and right and across the road, and the girl wasn't there anymore. No car had passed, so she couldn't have gotten in her lift. The club behind her was shuttered up and bolted, and I looked away for about 2 seconds. Where did you go, mysterious girl? Number 2. New Year's Eve horror story. I'm a long-time reader, first-time poster, so I don't even know if this is the right place to post this on. But it was incredibly terrifying, and it still gives me chills, as cliche as that sounds. I know some people say these stories are 100% true for immersion, but believe me when I say that this is 100% true. 3 of my friends and I were spending the night together on New Year's Eve about a year ago, and we decided we wanted to spend the night in a tent outside, really close to the woods. We were laughing and messing about, normal teenage things. Then we heard this rustling outside in the leaves. Figuring it was just an animal or something, we shrugged it off. At this point, it was nearing midnight, and we had a flashlight on in the tent, and we were blasting music. That's when all hell broke loose. We heard this chirping noise outside. When I say chirping, I don't mean it was like a bird or a raccoon, but this unearthly chirping that didn't sound like any animal at all. In fear we were about to be ambushed, I demanded my friends temporarily turn off the lights and the music. At first they looked at me like I was crazy, but I strengthened my tone. Turn it all off now! At this point, they knew I was serious, so they turned it all off and listened carefully. There it was again, this unearthly chirping that didn't sound like anything. My friends and I were scared, but I was a little bit braver than the rest of them. I had been taking karate for about 4 years, and I'm a very tall female capable of taking down a grown man. So I figured I could take whatever was out there, or at least I could carry one of my friends if we had to run away. They all tried to play it cool and said it must have been one of those screamer firework things, but I could tell they were all scared themselves. We carried on messing about for a few more minutes, desperately trying to forget about the screech chirping thing outside. Then we heard it again, this time much closer to our tent. This was the first time I could properly hear it. When it made a clearer sound, reality drop kicked me in the stomach. It was big, and it was almost right outside our tent. My friends and I were about to shit ourselves, so they started asking me questions as to what I thought it was. I was the friend who was into all things paranormal, and I still am, but I've never been a paranoid person. So they asked me. I told them, just as a suggestion, that it could be a skinwalker or a fleshgate, because I read somewhere that they mock the voices of your friends and emit noises that they think will lure out their victims. I only said this because I thought that could explain the scream chirp, but I think they were really scared due to this. We heard it again. At this point, everyone was scared, and one of them eventually called her older brother to come and hang out for a while. While he was there, just our luck, we couldn't hear the chirp screech anymore. Damn, we hung out with him for a while until we all decided to go on a walk with him. The walk was fun, and my friends were terrified because we were walking around in the dark. But I've always liked the dark, as it was so vast and mysterious. I was also hoping we would find the fleshgate, so my friends would stop acting like stuck-up little craps that weren't scared, because I could see they were scared themselves. Part of me was terrified to see what would happen if we stumbled across a fleshgate. But my friend's older brother had a knife with him, and I was prepared to stab it if he wasn't. Fast forward later into the night, we were blasting music again and playing with a multicolored strobe light. Probably not the best way to avoid being jumped in the night now, and I think about it. My friend's brother had left us his knife in case we had anything else that night. My friends all decided that I was the only one who would be brave enough to actually stab someone or something if it came to it. So I was in charge of holding the 6-inch knife all night. Thankfully, it wasn't a sheet, because despite my training, I'm quite clumsy, especially this late into the night. I couldn't help myself taking the knife out because it was so interesting and beautiful to look at. There it was again, the same chirp screech. I unzipped the tent to look, knife drawn, and heard something scurry away quickly into the woods. Since my friends didn't hear it, I left it alone. Everything was fine for the rest of the night. That is, until I was the only one awake. I heard this horrible scream howl, much more blood-curdling than the chirps. It kept getting closer to the tent and then backing away, like it somehow knew I was the only one awake. It circled us, made itself sound distant, then come back with another howl. One of my friends briefly awoke and told me it was probably someone having a party, but I could tell she was just saying that so she could get the sleep she desperately needed. Me, however, I could go for 3 days straight without having to sleep once. I was perfectly fine without sleep, unless I had a long day of school the next day or something. Believe me when I say, I didn't let my guard down once. I listened to this thing and the location the cries took place. I wasn't about to let some fleshgate or some skinwalker come and kill my friends, and I on the night that was supposed to be fun. I drew the knife a few times and practiced slashing the air in case he attacked, but it never did. It just spent hours taunting me, trying to draw me out. I was incredibly tempted to run out there, just to get a look at it, but I knew that was exactly what it wanted. Waiting for me not to be in a group, so it could pick the threat off, and then my friends. There was no way in hell I would let it anywhere near my friends. The older brother had left to go to a friend's house later that night as well, and the friend we were all staying with lived with her grandma. I lived around the neighborhood, and both my mum and my dad were home. My dad is a big guy, standing at 6'2" and very strong, but it would be too far to run and ask for help. I couldn't go out there to see what it was even if I wanted to. Even though I'm pretty damn fast, I was weak considering how late it was. And I would become this thing's prey knowing this. I just laid back, knife at the ready, listening in absolute horror. You don't know what true vulnerability is until you're on the outskirts of the woods in a tent that 3 lives are in your hands, while some paranormal creature is hunting you, teasing you, and you only have a close combat weapon that you're not even certain would put a scratch on it. I sat there in silence until around 6 in the morning, when I was certain it had stopped. I couldn't take it anymore. The damn thing had driven me crazy. My work there was done, as I was certain it was gone. I left the knife on my pillow and a note that said I went home and I wasn't dead, so I could reassure my friends when they woke up later on. So I began to walk home to my house with the streets poorly illuminated by street lamps. There weren't that many, leaving a lot of dark spaces that I couldn't even see if I tried. To make matters 10 times worse, my glasses were smudged and I could barely see anything. I knew it was better to my advantage if I kept them on though, because I'm blind as a bat. I scanned my surrounding, my whole way there, keeping my eyes on every direction this thing could attack me from. He was probably just waiting to get me alone, but I wasn't going to let it do anything to me. When I finally got to my house, the door was unlocked to my relief, so I could get in without my parents hearing me. Unfortunately, this was 5 in the morning, and as I mentioned before, clumsy as ever, so I bumped into everything as I tried to navigate myself to my room, where I forced myself to go sleep. After that, when asked, my friends would say it was a screamer, firework, or some animal, but I can tell they were scared, and they just were trying to make sense of it all. I tried to make sense of it too, but I just couldn't. I knew what I heard and it was much worse than what they could have imagined. They probably thought I mentioned Fleshgate and Skinwalkers just to scare them, but I truly believe it was one of the two. Nothing like this has ever happened again, but there's a reason we haven't been sleeping outside in a while. So, thank you for listening and reading this long story of mine. So, now I'm going to be reviewing these two stories. So, the first story was uploaded to the paranormal Reddit by the username Hit and Myth, and the story was called The New Year's Eve Girl Who Wasn't There. Now, this story was a good story. It was creepy and scary, because who would not be scared of a demon ghost girl that comes and goes, comes and disappears? So it was a very scary story, and I rated 100 out of, let's say, 101. Okay, it was a really good story. I'm sorry I'm not making anything I can actually judge this like on a meter, but maybe in the future. But yeah, for comedic purposes, it's 100 out of 101. Okay, now the second story was by Sarcastic Something Wolf. Okay, you can see the name. It was called The New Year's Eve Horror Story. Now, this story, I have no idea what the story was. I wanted to share it with you because it sounded good, it had potential, but to be honest, I do not think this one is real at all. The first one could be real because there are a lot of ghost sightings everywhere, but the second one, however, there's too many things going on, too many fictional things I can say, because when it comes to a character, you want to make that character very strong. There are many times the author of this story has mentioned that I was strong, I was not scared. There are many things. First she says it was 6 a.m, then she says it was 5 a.m, maybe it was a typing mistake. Then she says she was there looking out for her friends, but then she leaves and abandons her friends, which is stupid because you're there out there protecting them. You would stick it out with them, you'd go home with them. So this is why I think the second story is fake. The first one could be real, but also could be fake, but the second one I think is very fake, but it is a good story and it is scary. So I have to thank both authors for their stories, and I'm going to now leave Mr. Midnight to do the outro.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope the new year brings you more nightmares and things that your brain and mind cannot even imagine. I'll see you again very soon. So until then, love the darkness as it always follows.